Hi folks, my name is Kevin Dunn and welcome to Agency Unfiltered, a bi-weekly web series and podcast that interviews agency owners around agency operations, growth, and scale. Nobody knows how to scale agencies better than those that are already doing it, and they're happy to share an unfiltered look into what has worked and what hasn't. In this episode, we have Bob and Verity Dearsley, the Chief Executive and Managing Director of B2B Marketing Labs, an agency with offices in London, Singapore, and Germany. Bob and Verity discuss scale points, or the times in your agency's growth trajectory where you must invest, revamp, or pivot to properly scale. We discuss how they revamped their marketing strategy, prioritized their internal admin, built an HR function, and more. Recognize your own scale points with Agency Unfiltered starting now. Bob and Verity, hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Agency Unfiltered.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you.
It's very kind.
Very excited to be here.
Awesome. I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion today. I think what we were talking about earlier was this idea as an agency looks to grow and scale, and for your team it was, through HubSpot's partner program to become a diamond partner, beyond, and plus. There's a number of scale points or pivotal moments in that growth trajectory where you have to make particular investments and dedicate some time, effort, resources. Love to unpack that. Mm-hmm. So maybe would the best place to start be, if you just want to give a landscape of how do you define scale point? And then in your trajectory, what was the very first thing that you took a hard look at adjusting, updating, or investing in?
I think for us, it started with the wonders of being an agency. The customer and the client always comes first. So, we do inbound. It's what we sell. It's what we're really, really good at. We were really bad at doing it for ourselves. And I think that became the very first kind of pivot, come to the light moment when we realized that we talk about the cobbler's children, but effectively we weren't eating our own dog food, we weren't drinking our own champagne, whatever the phraseology you want to use.
I think I prefer champagne over dog food, but I
think most people do.
Some dog food can be very good.
Yeah. I'll take your word for it.
It was the main one for us. That first pivot point was going right. However we tried to cut it with our own account teams, creating content or treating ourselves, we tried very hard to treat ourselves like a client. Yeah. But inevitably, the paying clients end up stealing time because they have to come first.
Which feels justified, right?
100%. And for us, that first kind of grown-up scale point was to take one of our, honestly, most experienced account managers within our team and fully take them out of client services and put them fully into our own marketing activities. And it was kind of painful for the delivery team to lose.
Expensive.
Yeah.
You suddenly got one person who's offline from that process, and to start with, it felt painful. Over time, it's delivered what we needed, a clear focus.
Yeah.
We had to double down on our own content.
Or quadruple down in the end.
Yeah, and we were poor at it. You suddenly realise that you're advocating a whole stack of content on behalf of your clients. It's a key thing. Mm-hmm. And then you're
looking at your own website.
It's collecting dust. Yeah.
Don't look over there.
Yeah, right.
So we went through a period in the run-up to actually making Diamond, which we did in May, and then in the previous October was the point at which we pushed Matt, God bless Matt, into the front line, as it were, and he quadrupled the amount of content that we had, quadrupled the number of conversion points on the website itself.
Wow.
And
it quadrupled the leads.
Absolutely.
It quadrupled the traffic. It worked.
Wow.
This stuff works.
Who'd have thought that this inbound thing worked?
That's right. Yeah.
So we were just lagging behind, and we've carried on with that, and that's kind of spurred on the sales activity.
Yeah.
One of the things is driving that sales activity and managing that sales process. So we'd had just basically Verity and I selling.
Whilst wearing 27 other hats and running around running the business.
A dedicated BDR that we had also got trained up. And I put myself through Dan Tyer's boot camp.
Yep.
God bless you,
Yeah,
Dan.
we're big advocates.
I feel like we need a little sales, a little line.
It'd be a good piece for
I
that.
wanted to go through that to kind of understand what sort of people I was needing to hire myself.
Sure.
And also I kind of also feel that if you're going to ask people to whatever you're going to ask them to do, you need to have done it yourself.
Sure.
So it made a huge difference. But with that focus, and with the focus on content and focus on sales, and our sales picked up and kicked up.
That's great.
And I think the classic cycle you get into in the earlier stages is you're always conscious of the fact that big deal that you had, that you just deal that pushed you up to the next level. You've only got 11 months until that kind of drops off the end of the conveyor.
Yeah.
Sure.
So you've got to keep putting more on the top there the whole time. And it's very easy to run up to that point and then, damn, we just lost that last one off the edge before you got to the next level.
Can't ever rest on your laurels in that regard, right?
You got to keep running once you're...
And also doing that without totally stressing your services team. So making sure that you're spending enough time as an organisation focusing on the people that are keeping those accounts afloat. Because the other thing to get to that scale point is renewals and, happy clients, happy life, larger retainers. Moving away from project, I know, is something that a lot of the agencies talk about from reaching that scale point, because it's very hard to reach that scale if you don't have long-term relationships where you can continue to grow with your clients.
And I think it's hard to know what that trigger point is. But from our organisational perspective, it was very clear at around 25 people that you move into a phase where your HR is sucks, basically.
Yeah.
You're just not putting the time in.
We weren't doing a good job of it.
It's hard to balance that with everything else you have going on, I can imagine.
Things like appraisals and check-ins with, your internal admin tends to be the first thing that drops off, because you'll always focus on the clients and focus on the deliverables first.
Right.
So
and you put, you schedule reviews going ahead, but just where your reviews are in place, then a prospect pops up. And the only time they can do it is when you've got those reviews.
Right.
And what do you do? The employees come second when they have to come first.
Yeah.
And I think that was a significant piece for us. And it's a luxury that comes with scale. Because there are certainly times early on, and I've spoken on a number of occasions at HubSpot about agency life is tough, and we're all brought together, we're all bonded by the fact that you've got to make payroll every month, and if you can't make the payroll, then that's real stress. But you reach a point, hopefully, which that becomes slightly less of a stress. Cash flow is managing itself. But if you're going to carry on and build the business through that, you've got to reinvest some of that. And our reinvestment was in Matt, from a marketing perspective. We put a large chunk of money and effort putting a sensible HR system in place, something that would give us a framework to manage people, manage our review processes, manage all of our employee engagement processes. And those two are pretty key planks in that process. Try and build up the sales, try and get away from the point where sales is entirely dependent upon the principals, as it were, to a point where we had a structure, and initially a BDR, then a couple of BDRs, and then using those guys to actually take away a lot of the early stage process.
early qualification elements.
Yeah, qualify the leads.
Yeah.
So we're still, and always will be, I think, actively involved in the sales process.
Sure.
And the consulting end of bringing people on board. But you've got somebody who's effectively managing your sales conveyor belt.
That's right. Yeah, you come in later in that process. Yeah, right. Once, but only speaking to the people, obviously, that have kind of fit the bill.
Qualified enough.
That's excellent.
Are far enough down the cycle to actually be valuable to warrant that really important resource at the top, which is...
We effectively come in as, then it's the pre-sales consultancy piece, which is what's the right program building that. It isn't the going in and selling inbound or like the purpose of why we're all here. It's the piece of the jigsaw puzzle of, okay, what's the right program? What are the right elements for us to put into the program for you here?
Let me just ask one qualifying question too. I think you mentioned for the dedicated HR hire, 25 people felt like the point in which that was a resource that was required. What would you say was the team size for when you had Matt do dedicated marketing? And then for the first BDR hire, when you scaled that out, just kind of what are those team size when you realized it was time to make all of those investments?
It's a tough one because I look back at it now and realize that we probably should have done it sooner. So I would say as soon as you can physically afford it, get it in there. But I think we were maybe people. 12, 12, 13.
About a dozen people when we pulled Matt out of line.
So you're saying there was an opportunity to do it earlier?
It actually, funnily enough, with Matt, it was a kind of trigger point. Was he'd been with us for 3 years, and I kind of feel like anybody deserves. After 3 years, it's kind of like saying to somebody, okay, you're probably thinking about your career and moving on after 3 years. So why don't we just imagine that you have resigned. And
tell me the job you'd like to apply for.
Exactly.
That's great.
So how are we going to fit you into the business? Because you're a really valuable commodity to us now. You're part of the business. You understand more about. Don't want to lose you. And that was it fitted really well for us both to make that transition.
So he helped shape that, the title, the role, the responsibilities, kind of what that would look like.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Very much so.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we have a
He's been with us 5 years now.
We have a love-hate relationship, you know.
Oh, good.
As anyone does.
I want more leads.
After 5 years,
it's more traffic.
That's right.
If you're the marketer in the middle of a bunch of marketers, gee, are you under the spotlight?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Yeah, it's true.
Always.
Let me ask you this. This is actually going back to something I think we were talking about earlier, but there was a beer reference that you made, and I thought this was really interesting. And I'll just leave it at that. I'll try and tee it up like that. But how do you guys view yourselves? Which beer would you align with?
Yeah, well, if you were a beer,
personally or professionally?
I love that. Depends on the day of the week.
It's Stella Artois. It's an important aspect for us, and I've always admired Stella Artois' tagline, which is reassuringly expensive, and the point is that you have and every agency has a very finite amount of senior talent in the business that they can engage with from a consulting perspective, and that's the bit which will bottleneck the fastest. And if you push your price down in your engagements, if there is a tendency to try to win the deal at any price, and you're depressing your prices accordingly, you can probably win the deal. But
eventually, right? Yeah, at some point.
And
you won't retain it, though.
The issue is that if you start to drive the price of this very finite commodity for the whole of the channel, if you try and push that down and start a race towards the bottom, then the worst thing that can happen is you win that. And my view is purely based upon the fact that it is good for the whole marketplace if we try very hard to maintain that value of the highest level consulting work that we do, and the vast majority of that Verity and I do is eyeball to eyeball with a chief exec or a marketing director who values that advice. And if you sell that in cheaply, they're probably not going to value it as much. And you're certainly not going to do yourselves any services in the process.
Right, and you mentioned too, if it just so happens that you do eventually win that sort of deal, by no means is it ever going to renew, because you're going to learn very quickly that the price point is not profitable for your agency, right?
It kind of ties in, I think, with the other scale point for us is when you can start to be slightly pickier with the types of clients that you can work with. And I'm very aware this one is a luxury, because at the beginning of it, you sell to every man and his dog and his neighbor and his neighbor's best friend, and we did.
Yeah, how can you say no to revenue if you're...
Exactly. Yeah. There reaches a point, though, when those start to scale up, where from a servicing standpoint, often the people who've haggled on price and who, you've really driven to the bottom and you've you've really worked out those deals, they don't understand the value of the program. They won't stick around for long enough to see inbound really take shape, because it isn't an overnight quick win from a success standpoint. And often they are the clients that drive our teams absolutely doolally. They want everything. They want it now. They want it cheap. I've had some very upset account managers over time who you need to protect, and the value of those people versus the value of being run ragged by some of those clients. Every now and again, you've just got to stand up and go, enough is enough. This is a poor fit. We shouldn't work with you any longer. We need to go and work with people who are a better fit. So as soon as you can get to that point within your organization where you can start to evaluate some of the clients that you're with and work out if you want them in your future, it's a huge piece to be able to look at.
How would you identify when the timing's right, where you can start, or what's the threshold when you race not all the way to the bottom, but when you're open to lowering price, but then also being able to say yes or no to revenue? Does that make sense? We mentioned, it's a luxury point to be able to be pickier with clients. So how do you find when you should be comfortable sticking hard to a price point, whereas in the early days you'd have to have more flexibility, but you also have a hard time saying no to revenue if you're just getting started and are desperate for business? Where's that tipping point?
Well, you talk about if you're going to give something away, get something back.
Yeah, sure. And that's if there's a discount involved, and occasionally one has to, then you're pushing for payment terms, and payment terms will be a key part of that.
Less revenue, better cash runway.
Yeah, I mean, very, very often it's a case of, sorry, it's coming away from your point, but often you get to a situation where you've won the deal and you're effectively shaking hands on a deal, and now it's going to legal. Now, the price I've agreed with you today, when legal come back and say we want 60-day terms, my view would be, well, actually no, because we agreed this price based upon our terms, which are strictly 30 days. If you want to push it to 60 days, I'll have a different price. Now, those start to be tough conversations.
Right.
But early on in the process, you pretty much take anything that gets offered, and I can't answer your question. It isn't.
There's no number.
It's not black and white, right? Yeah.
No. I mean, I think there's a feel point. You feel, and it will depend upon
how many times a day you check cash flow.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I've had daily cash flow projections for the vast majority of the time that we've run an agency, because you have to keep a careful eye on these things.
Right. So it sounds like, though, if anything, if there's the negotiation aspect to a price point, then you're saying that the concession in price, you're working in more advantageous terms for the agency.
Certainly, it's a balancing act at the point. With a larger organisation, we deal with a lot of larger businesses now. And when procurement gets involved, you've got to bear in mind that most of the procurement team are on bonuses for what they can negotiate on the price. So the position that you were in at the outset when you thought you'd agreed the deal, you're going into another round of negotiation with those guys, and you've just got to be careful and wary of that. I think over... most of the people watching this will either think we're nuts if you're talking about actually firing a client, or they will have appreciated that they're maybe battling with that particular feeling at the moment. And what's worse for you in many respects? What is worse for you? Having to go out to a recruitment agency to replace the account manager that you're.
Has literally wanted to jump out the window for the last 3 months because
couldn't take it anymore.
That client broke for you. Not wasn't your efforts. It was the client effectively who broke your account manager. And trying to find a HubSpot account manager right now,
difficult.
That's tough. Yeah.
So there's a ripple effect for just 100%. Having just these bad fit, wrong fit clients sticking around, right? It's not just the revenue that you put up with, but it's you're losing team members, you're losing staff, and then how hard is it to replace them, right?
I think regardless of the size of your agency, whether or not there's 3 of you or 30 of you, the value of your people, making sure that you spend time to check in, understand what their career and development goals and requirements are spend time in our organisation, buy them a beer, or a non-alcoholic soft drink, whatever whatever is your choice. But the value of our people is essential to us, and however busy you get, carve out that time. We still try and fight for more time with our team as frequently as we can. We're still looking at different ways to reshape, restructure, how do we solve, well, everything around HubSpot is about solving for the customer, but also how do you solve for your team? How do you solve inside your agency to make sure that you're valuing the right people, people are getting what they want and what they deserve?
How far out are you forecasting your org chart?
Oh, we just went through a whole process now, which is changes and upgrades through October and into our end of year, which is 31st of March next year.
Oh, wow.
So I can't see any further than that at the moment. But that feels like 9 months is about the right sort of span.
Any more investments in another non-delivery role? Like, what's the next step for you? What's the next kind of org chart split or branch or next hire?
We're probably at this stage it's sales.
Yeah.
More sales.
I mean we're at the right level in terms of diamond, but HubSpot, I'm sure, are about to introduce another tier or two.
Spoiler alert coming soon, I'm sure.
So we've got to make sure that we're on the front end of that.
Yeah.
We made diamond first in the UK. I need to make sure that we have a decent chance of getting to
You want to be the first each time?
Well, challenge extended.
No. I know there's a ton of people.
We know who you are.
Right. No, it's fine. You can go first. You have to keep your foot on the gas.
Sure.
I don't know. That's a hard one. We hired an operations director.
Yeah, that was our last.
We're June now.
December she joined.
December, and we used her as an external consultant for the first 3 months to look at what we were doing, and then she's come into our. She is not directly client facing, but effectively manages what I would call revenue management. So all of the contractual engagement pieces. She's not a salesperson, but all of that.
Service, contract renewals,
Yeah.
terms, and she comes back into the deals to facilitate
The
that.
process elements of that sales piece.
Do you find, was the motivation there taking it off the account managers or inbound strategists? Like it keeps contract.
It's a different mindset, I think, for a really good account manager who's active in an account.
Sure.
Who has if they're doing the job right, then their client is their best friend.
Right.
And they're really very close. But you need a commercial aspect associated with that. Yeah. So she has a healthy commercial attitude.
That's great.
That brings to those processes.
I think that's the kind of summary point as well, is as an agency owner, when you started it from the beginning and you're teeny tiny, you cannot be precious about the way that you're doing things and the way that things have always been done. The very first inbound we went to, you sat on a panel and someone, a very small agency owner, asked you the question, how do I hire more me's to put into my business? And everyone was being very polite, and you literally took the mic and said, don't be so ridiculous, don't hire more you's, figure out what you're bad at and hire people who are good at that. Exactly. Yeah, right. And I think for us, we've been doing this a long time. We think we're doing a great job bringing in someone at a director level for operations, someone else's point of view to sit and look at our business.
Right.
What will we crap at? And it's not an easy mirror to look in all the time, but it's a mirror that you've got to take out every now and again and have someone else sit down and look at you and go,
come and look at the business. And that's the reason for using her, a new hire in that situation, as effectively a consultant.
Yeah, that was purposefully an external hire.
She had to learn how we do things, and they talk about the first 100 days. So take the first 100 days to understand what we're about, and then at the end of that, give us a scorecard. Give us a scorecard view on how we're performing, and at that point, make your changes. Help us to uprate what we do and improve and get better at it.
That's great. What did she score you worst at?
That's It's an interesting one.
Process documentation, she'd probably say. I think that's probably the other big scale
Written
thing.
documentation, process documentation.
Again, you scale and you grow, and the way that we sell is kind of in his brain and partly in mine, and the way that we deliver services was partly in mine and partly in my account director's brains, and that's the other big thing that we've done.
That there were points of siloed knowledge, and people also being asked questions and oh yeah, I've got that's what you should use, but actually somebody else has been through that.
Slightly different versions of the truth.
Right, yeah.
And honestly, that was slowing us down. So yeah, she did call us out on that. And
it's good feedback to hear.
And then she picked up the task of rectifying
Documentation.
full scale methodologies, process documentation.
That's great.
Which is great, in order to give us the opportunity, because we're trying to internationalize, and what we're trying to do is to be able to do things the same way in different countries, and that's a challenge in itself.
Well, that'll be our sequel episode, to dig into the internationalization
World
process.
domination.
Because that's we could talk on that for forever. I can imagine there's a number of complexities and intricacies to that entire process.
Yeah,
Jawohl.
like you say, an entirely different video.
That's my goodness. One final question for you before I let you split. Ask this in every episode.
Okay.
What would you both consider the strangest part of agency life? weirdest part. So any anecdotes, anything you have for us?
Outside of working with family.
Yeah.
It's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
In the agency, I just think like every day is different. The things some of the clients come out with, honestly. We love them though. I don't know.
It's a very tough question. Yeah, we
I think the madness is what makes it fun.
and it's I mean, it has to be fun.
Yeah, right.
I mean, if
You guys have been at it for long enough.
Yeah.
I hope it's fun, right?
Yeah, I've been at it for a very long time. So, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't still enjoy it.
Yeah.
But so I'll turn it around and say that the employees are the weirdest part of what we do.
In all of the best ways.
And I was going to qualify it by saying that they bring so many different aspects of their experience into what we do, and I find myself. Actually, you called this out the other day.
You just called a whole team weird, by the way. Nice job.
I know,
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
That they bring so much, and we laugh a lot. I mean, you come into the office and find our client's services director howling with laughter, and I think
Quite literally howling.
Yeah.
Shouldn't they be a bit more serious?
Have a lot of fun going on here.
No, they are having a good time.
That's great.
Doing what they're doing and helping their clients. And it's not, I kid you not, it's not that we don't take our work seriously. It's just that if you take yourself too seriously, that's when the problems occur.
So
There's a
true.
distinction there.
So maybe I didn't quite answer your question.
I think that fits the bill just perfect.
And
Yeah,
certainly
that's a
they
good
have the weirdest boss.
one. Oh, yeah. They're like, right
I'll
behind
let you have that.
us. Guys, I appreciate it so much. Seriously, thank you. We'll wrap there. But
Thank you
thanks
very much.
for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks,
Real
guys.
pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. All right, guys, that's another Agency Unfiltered.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Agency Unfiltered. If you like what you saw, heard, or read, make sure to subscribe to our playlist on YouTube, our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or our newsletter on agencyunfiltered.com. Alongside episode launch notifications, the newsletter also comes with a ton of other helpful, strategically curated agency content from yours truly. And if you want to keep the conversation going or provide a counterpoint to this episode's discussion, tweet me at Kevin_Dunn. I'll see you again in 2 weeks, but in the meantime, keep it unfiltered and let's all grow.